Put God first.
Your presence in their lives gives them validation.
Our children don't need us to be superheroes.
If you do these things, the next generation and the generations that follow will live in a world far better than the one we have today.
Men, stand up, be fathers.
Hey guys, it's Mark, your host and founder of The Inspired Legacy. As always, this is the show that equips and inspires you to be the much-needed spiritual leaders in your home. And today we're talking about a key aspect of leadership at home, and that's the idea of intentionality. You guys know this, but there are literally limitless distractions this day and age, whether it's a distraction in your hand, by way of your phone or tablet, a distraction at work or a work-related event. There just doesn't seem to be enough time in the day. And what little time we do have, it's easy to get pulled away from what really matters, which is why it's so important that as men, as leaders in our homes and fathers to the next generation, we've got to be intentional with not only how we spend our time, but how we parent our kids. Today, I'm talking with Justin Batt. He is the founder of Daddy Saturday, something that he started in his own backyard, but has grown to be a national movement of creating intentional fathers committed to raising good kids. Justin is the author of a book, also titled Daddy Saturday, and he is the brains behind Dadboss, an online on-demand course for guys looking to become better dads. But most importantly, Justin is a committed husband and father, and he's on a mission. Get this, you guys. This is bold. He's on a mission to impact 10 million fathers in the next 10 years. And I hope this episode helps him take a small step to achieving that goal. So I want you to listen up. Here's my conversation with the Dadboss himself, Justin Batt. Justin, welcome to the show, man. How are you?
Hey, Mark, I'm doing very well. I'm better than I deserve. Good to be here with you today.
Sound like Dave Ramsey. That's his classic comeback.
Yeah, well, I just moved to Nashville, so I have to use a Dave Ramsey line.
That's called assimilation, I think.
That's right.
That's funny. Well, I'm excited to dive in today, man. Like we were just talking about off air, I think we're kind of cut from the same cloth, and we've got a lot of things, a lot of similar passions and interests, fatherhood being first and foremost. So we're going to talk about Daddy Saturday, and I know there's a lot of moving pieces to this puzzle. So break it down for us. What is Daddy Saturday composed of?
Well, I'll just give you the quick genesis story so you can understand the root of where this came from and what brought me to this point, and I guess really ignited the calling that I've now embarked on. Over a decade ago, my wife was a teacher, and she left teaching and decided to go into start her own business, and I supported her in that. And she opened a couture bridal boutique, and we had our first daughter at the time, our first child, and named the store after her, Hayden Olivia Bridal. And found myself at home with a 2-week-old baby girl all day on Saturdays. My wife worked in her store, being an entrepreneur, wearing all the hats. And then fast forward a couple of years, and we had 3 boys in a row every 2 years. So I was at home, 4 kids all day on Saturday, and corporate America father. So traveling a lot during the week, busy week as most of us, burning the candle at both ends, and found myself stressed out, overwhelmed, tired, frustrated, wanting a great day with my kids on Saturday, but often having what I called a dad hangover when I'd wake up on those Saturdays, not knowing what to do with my kids and trying to fill the gap of a full day together, and tired after a long week. And so I just got sick and tired of being sick and tired of not having the best day that I could with my kids. So I began to be intentional and plan our day together and create a game plan and create these crazy events with stuff we could find around the house or things that we could do in our local community. And my kids affectionately started to call it Daddy Saturday, and they were looking forward to those days and those times together. And I recognized very quickly that I had a recipe for change in my own family. Our relationship, communication, even my relationship with my wife started to grow as a result of these Saturdays together. And it became beyond just Saturday, right? It became a mindset that I would take with me around fatherhood into the way that I approach my kids and my wife. And I really had this formula that was working well in our family. So we started posting videos on YouTube. And then about 2 years ago, I did a TEDx on fatherlessness. And I learned about this epidemic in our country of the lack of dads in the home, but also the dads who are there physically present, but emotionally absent. And Mark, it has lit me on fire. And I said, you know what? I've got something that can help these dads. I was that dad for a period of time. And so I wrote the book, Daddy Saturday. We created the movement, put out a bunch of different resources to help dads be intentional, engaged, started a nonprofit, And now we're an international organization helping to grow fatherhood around the world.
Man, that is awesome. Well, kudos for you, first of all. And your Genesis story is, I can relate to it because a lot of what I'm doing with the Inspired Legacy came out of similar pains, right? And I think that's what drives most guys to, take action and create something. But let's break down this organization a little bit more. So you've got your book, and we'll dive into that a little bit. But talk about the foundation. Is that kind of the hub of Daddy Saturday at this point, or how does that fit into the picture?
Yeah, so I did a bunch of research and I talked to some mentors, and this isn't my day job, so I have essentially multiple careers at this point. It feels like multiple jobs all at once. And so I just recognized that I wouldn't be in a position to personally go out and do a bunch of fundraising to support the foundation to accomplish its goals financially. So the best way that I knew how to accomplish that was to create a for-profit that would then go out and sell products and services to dads that would help them in their relationships with their kids, and then use those funds to help drive my nonprofit goals and initiatives. So that's what we did. I'm great at scaling businesses, and I'm a deep entrepreneur myself. And so we created the for-profit, and then we created the nonprofit to then achieve the goals of increasing fatherhood around the world, reaching 10 million fathers in 10 years and ending fatherlessness through 4 distinct populations: the incarcerated, the National Guard, opportunity zones, so those low-income areas for economic investment, and then first responders. And so those are the 4 populations we serve. And then we started our Daddy Saturday Fatherhood Fellows organization, which is our international organization. And we have Daddy Saturday Kenya established right now. We've got Canada and Vietnam in the works. And super cool, Daddy Saturday Kenya actually sent me some pictures over the weekend. They're building their first office, like literally a physical structure with bricks and mortar in the middle of Kenya. And it'll be the hub for Daddy Saturday over there. And they're doing fatherhood programming and services and really just doing an incredible job of growing fatherhood.
Wow, man.
Over in Africa. So, super cool opportunity to really reach those fathers that are in need, not only here domestically, but around the world.
That's farther reaching than I even realized. Congratulations. That's pretty awesome.
Oh, thanks. It's, I learned a while back that God just kind of called me to this. And one of the things he said, Mark, was, he doesn't speak to me audibly, but
sure,
through prayer and just conversation, he kind of said, Justin, if you want to take this around the world, I will do that. But what I need you to do is focus on the father in front of you, and I'll make the connections. I'll make it happen. But you just got to focus on the person and serve them that's in front of you at that moment. So that's what I've tried to do in the platform. And sure enough, that's exactly what he's done.
Oh man, I can really relate to what you just said because it's very easy for me with the Inspired Legacy to get caught up in like the analytics of the show and how many likes I get on social media. And it's like, I got to be reminded, and what you just said was a good reminder, that there's a lot of areas and opportunity for me to focus right here in my own backyard. And if I do that, perhaps God will just take care of the rest. So that's a good message. That landed with me personally. What's your connection with the National Guard and first responders? I'm curious why those particular communities.
Yeah, it's a great question. I don't have any personal connection in my background or my family. I just looked at populations that I felt had a segment of fatherlessness in them, or perhaps had a propensity for that disengaged component. So I looked at the National Guard and said, well, gosh, 1 weekend a month, they're away from their families.
True.
So whether it's the mother being away or the father being away, how can I create a way to give them some resources so that if the father's away, he can still be connected to his kids and have things for them to do and that are, kind of at his request. And then when he comes back into the family, some ways to help them integrate. Same thing with the first responders, right? We had our local fire station, local police office before we moved from Charleston, South Carolina. We'd go down to the fire station, and those guys are working some crazy shifts and crazy hours, and they'd work, like a 12 plus hour shift on a Friday, and then they're home with their kids on Saturday. And I'm like, I'm complaining about being tired. Look at what they go through, right? Yeah. So how do you be engaged with your kids after you've just put in time like that on the job? And so creating ways to help them do that, or organizing events that would support them so they could be in community with other dads and have fun activities for their kids, but not have to exert all the energy of coming up with the idea and making it happen. So that's kind of the platform for Daddy Saturday. And when we looked at some of those populations, that's how we arrived at those groups.
Man, I love that, especially the military component, because and especially the National Guard, because military in general, you're signing up to be away from your family, but the National Guard, you have a normal everyday life, and your kids get accustomed to having you around. But then, like you said, that one weekend a year, or if you get called up to go overseas, then that's an extended period of time away from family that your kids are not accustomed to, certainly. So to have a platform and something in place to allow them to kind of bridge that gap, like you said, that's phenomenal, and that's a need that I never really even would have thought about. So that's awesome that you guys had the foresight to recognize that and took action on it. That's awesome.
Well, thank you. We're just getting started.
Yeah, well, I would imagine there's a lot of work to be done in terms of re-engaging fathers across the country. I think you look at so many headlines today. I mean, it's just ridiculous what's going on in our nation right now and in the streets of America. And I honestly believe, I've said this in other episodes, that so much of what we see in the news can be traced back to millennials, ultimately, that didn't have fathers, or their fathers were not engaged. And I think it's good. I'm happy to be doing my part, and I'm glad there's other people out there like yourself that are really taking steps forward to address the problem, because if we don't address it now, I can't imagine how much worse things are going to get in future generations.
Man, Mark, I couldn't agree more. And I think to comment on that, one of the principles from Daddy Saturday that came out in the book was this concept of, instead of trying to be your kid's hero, be their guide. And what I found was that, in doing research and talking to a lot of dads and looking at my own father and a lot of fathers around me, what I found was that so often dads try to be the hero of the story, right? We want to have that big S on our chest and be Superman for our kids. And that's great in terms of intention. But at this end of the day, what ends up happening when the father, especially, or the parent, tries to be the hero, is they don't allow their kid to experience success or failure on their own,
right,
especially at an early age. And oftentimes they actually prevent their kids from failure.
Yeah.
So what happens is, like the millennial generation, by and large, not to stereotype, but it's true if you look at it,
Yep.
many of them never experienced failure. They had helicopter parents, snowplow parents, bulldozer parents, whatever you want to call it.
Yep.
And so now they're in their 20s and 30s. They're experiencing failure for the first time, especially with COVID, right? And the crisis right now, and it's catastrophic. They've got no mechanism to deal with it, because failure at 8 is way different than failure at 28 or 38. And failure at 8, that's when we want our kids to fail, because those are minor failures that most times we can recover from with maybe a minor scrape, a bump, or a bruise, right? But when you fail at 28 or 38, it can be far more drastic. And I think that it's that scenario. The other part of it is the absent or disengaged or disenfranchised father, as you mentioned. That's also a part of that. And so those kids never had they may have failed, but they never had the guide to walk them through that process of how to fail forward, fail fast, right, and fail appropriately to learn and grow from that.
Yeah.
And you're 100% right that syndrome has now permeated our society, and I'm still seeing it with Gen Z to an extent. So it's a big shift we need to make as fathers in positioning ourselves as guides. The other thing it does, it's really cool, and you're a guy that I can already tell probably does this or would get this, is when you are the guide, it lowers your ego and your pride. And it allows you to step aside in areas that you're not an expert in and give those experiences to your kids through other guides.
That's a good point.
Other men who can come into their life and teach them things that you could never teach them on your own. But you got to lower your ego to be able to do that. Man, my kids have had some of the coolest experiences at the hands of other dads or other men. And I am all about that. And, I show my kids, look, I'm not an expert at everything. There's things that I'm not good at, and I'm not going to hold you back from having that experience in your life just because it's something that I don't enjoy or don't have a passion for or don't have an expertise in.
Yeah, man, that's really good stuff. And it's a really good point you made about being the hero or wanting to be the hero, because in my personal experience, like when you position yourself as the hero, you almost set yourself up to fail, because that being the hero almost implies like you need to be perfect. And you're never going to be perfect. And it can lead to seasons of like indecision or inaction, because it's not quote unquote perfect, whatever you have in mind to do with your kids. And so I have had to very intentionally step away from the hero role like you described and step into more of that guide role. And I think I've done that sort of subconsciously, not really realizing it, but the way you articulated it there, that made a lot of sense. And so, guys listening, that's a trap that you want to avoid. Don't consider yourselves to be your kid's hero. Be their guide. That's really good. I want to dive into kind of stepping away from Daddy Saturday a little bit, but I know that you lead a very active lifestyle, and I'll call you an athlete. I think that's fair. A lot of guys have we all want to have the athletic body, but it's tough to balance fitness with fatherhood. So I know you talk about this a lot in your social media anyway. Kind of unpack that a little bit. What's your secret?
Well, I think that when you look at fatherhood, there's 4 pillars that I often find are the most important. We built the Dadboss course around these 4 pillars. It's faith, family, fitness, and finance. And I think as a father, if you take care of those 4 walls of fatherhood, then you're doing really well and you'll be healthy. You got to manage them all at the same time, and it's not always easy, and one may take priority over the others. But if you create routines, habits, and rituals, and that's the point I'm going to get to here, that can lead to consistency, and consistency leads to results over time. So for me, what I've found is that by having a focused intensity on those 4 areas, and we'll talk about fitness here, that I have built consistency over time, and it's allowed me to achieve some fitness or physical goals that I never dreamed possible. And a lot of it just came down to a couple of core areas. One is when I was young, you can go to the gym or do whatever you want anytime. You could eat anything you wanted, and it came easy. And I had a high metabolism, good genetics, I guess. So, I was trying to put on weight most of the time, not trying to lose weight. And fast forward, you get a bunch of kids and you start to hit your 30s and 40s, and all of a sudden everything changes, right? Your metabolism slows down, your testosterone starts to get depleted, life starts to happen, and your fitness can become far less of a priority because you have a focus on other things. So what I found is that getting up early in the morning, and that's me time, that's Justin time.
Yep.
And I'll do my devotional, I'll read and pray, get my spiritual mind right, get my emotions right, and then I'll go exercise. And I get that out first thing in the morning before the kids wake up. And I'll be done with my exercise by the time they're waking up for school. And now I've gotten in those core components of my day, and it won't be interrupted. And I've done it, and I do it every day, and I do it 7 days a week, and I don't take a day off. And, for me, that consistency and that rhythm is what keeps me in a healthy physical and mental state. And so it's building that consistency in that's really important. The other thing is it's finding what works for you. I like to do Spartan races. So that for me is an event that I look forward to. They've been canceled this year, right? So now I've had to change my mindset. But whether it's a 5K, a half marathon, a marathon, an obstacle course race, a local physical event, a triathlon, whatever it is for you, pick something that you have to look forward to. Because if you're just trying to exercise just to exercise, that's really hard to get motivated for. But if you've got something to look forward to that'll push you and you've got to train for because there's a milestone you're working towards, man, that'll change everything. And then the final thing I think that is so important that I've found in my life and with working with a lot of other men is feelings follow behaviors. Behaviors don't follow feelings.
That's good.
So even in the state that I'm in, as long as I've been doing this, I still don't feel like working out when I get up in the morning early. I rarely ever truly feel like it. But man, once I get into it, Mark, and those endorphins start flowing and the positive benefits of working out start to happen, then guess what? Those feelings follow my behaviors. So that's another important piece of this is don't look at your feelings, just use your behaviors. A quick story. So my dad had back surgery and he's trying to get back in shape. He's trying to lose some weight. Now he's got to have knee surgery, full knee replacement. And he's already had one. Now he's got to get the other one done. And he's like, I got to lose this weight. And how do I start? I've got a lot of weight to lose and I'm in bad physical health. And I said, Dad, just wake up on time and drive to the gym and walk in and stand there for the first couple of days. Don't do anything. Just walk to the gym and stand there at 6 a.m. because that's the time you're going to go. And then the next week you walk in and you step up on the treadmill and maybe you walk a couple of steps and then you walk out. And then the following week you walk for 2 minutes and then you just keep building on that. And before you know it, you're in a routine, it's natural, and you can continue to build on that until you get to the point that you want to be at where you're walking or running at the pace that you want to do. Same thing for anybody, right? Start small, micro wins lead to macro wins, consistency over time, focused intensity. And that for me is what has translated into my physical fitness success, if you call it that.
No, I would call it success. Yeah. So what are you training for these days since Spartan races have been canceled?
So we still have Spartan virtual races, which is really cool. Spartan's done a phenomenal job of pivoting like we all have had to do in the midst of this crisis. And so they have virtual races, so you can train and do that virtually. The kids and I all do the Spartan virtual races. And then I just set, Mark, I'm crazy. So if I'm going to say some stuff here and people are going to be like, you're nuts. But I looked at my driveway, and it's 378 feet or about 380 feet from the bottom to the top in elevation gain. So I took, and Mount Everest is 29,029 feet of elevation gain. So I calculated if I do my driveway 75 times, that's the equivalent of climbing Mount Everest. So that's what I'm training for right now. I'm going to climb Mount Everest in my front yard. And that's a goal that I've set for myself, and I got to do it within 24 hours. So 75 times, 24 hours. I was training for a 100-mile race in 24 hours to benefit Operation Underground Railroad, which is a child trafficking organization that prevents child trafficking, and unfortunately got canceled due to COVID. And then I got stung by a stingray and had to have ankle surgery. So that kind of washed that out. But I'm back, and Mount Everest is my next goal in my front yard.
That's awesome. That's creative. That's probably what it takes these days too.
You got to do what you got to do.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. So here's a question for you. Cause I know, like in my head, I know that getting up early is the key, but what time do you go to bed? I think that's the real question here.
So getting up early and doing a devotional and exercising in the morning, those are all what's known as Keystone Habits. Charles Duhigg wrote a great book called The Power of Habit. Talks a lot about Keystone Habits. And Keystone Habits are habits that will translate into other positive habits. So because I wake up early and because I take care of myself in the morning, guess what that translates to? I make positive choices throughout the day, including what I eat for dinner, what I do in the evenings. Like, do I watch TV or do I read a book or do I talk with my wife? Like, it all falls in line with that. And then what time I go to bed. So because I start getting up early, it translates into me prioritizing my evenings so that I get to bed on time. I'm in bed by 10 p.m. Every night and asleep by 10 most nights. There are some nights that, of course, that stretches, but I try to get 7 hours of sleep a night minimum. I need that for recovery based on the level of physical activity that I do and just the pace that I go about my days. So for me, it's 10 to 5, and that seems to work really well for me.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I'm a night owl, so that is my biggest struggle. And I found that if I stay up too late, then I'm hungry after dinner, and that's when I get myself into trouble. Not just with my diet, but then obviously staying up too late, not getting enough sleep, and then trickles into the following morning, and the plans you had for the next day kind of crumble, and it's a domino effect from there. You touched on Dadboss a second ago. Let's dive into that because I know that's relatively new. So unpack that for us a little bit more. You already did, but I guess tell us a little bit more about what that is, and maybe tell us about how you got hooked up with the Benham brothers.
Yeah, so I was looking for ways to, well, I guess I'll start with this, to reach 10 million fathers in 10 years and to end fatherlessness. It's a big goal. And so I tried to create an omni-channel platform to reach fathers through every method possible. And as I was looking at the landscape, I didn't really see a course on fatherhood that was out there that, one, I thought, met the needs of what the current father had. And I wanted to produce something that could be viewed on demand in a digital virtual environment and could be used with churches as a small group or a men's ministry type platform, and could be used by organizations and other groups. And so I really had this idea to create this digital product. And I met the Benham brothers randomly in a American Airlines Admirals Club as I was traveling for work, and saw them. I'd followed them for a long time and saw those two studly men sitting across from me in the Admirals Club. So I went up and talked to them, and it was just kind of like a divine appointment. And we kept the relationship going, and told them my desire to produce this course. And they had actually wanted to produce a course of their own and start their own kind of university, if you will, to house courses. So they agreed to partner with me and essentially help produce Dadboss. And, it's something that I never could have done on my own, never could have done financially, never could have done at the level that they were able to partner and help it be produced at. And so we all had the same goal and alignment, which was to produce a course for dads that would help them in the 4 areas: faith, family, fitness, and finance, and bring expertise into their lives in those areas and give them a digital product they could view on demand at any time. And that's what Dadboss is. And I know you do some fatherhood coaching, and so it's the same kind of platform, right? That this is a model that we can do at scale, and then eventually it can be used in a type of coaching setting. So that's what Dadboss is. And the Benham brothers, man, were such a catalyst in helping it happen. And then we partnered with also Chad Willardson, who, another cool story. I met Chad on LinkedIn. We just have great morals and alignment of our values. And I asked Chad to fly out and help me cover the financial segment. He owns a financial firm. And so he did. We never met in person. We talked on LinkedIn. That was it. And he flew all the way from California to Charlotte, North Carolina to film Dadboss. And it was all based on a LinkedIn connection.
That's awesome. Well, the program looks phenomenal. I have not purchased it myself, but it looks very well produced and very well put together. And every promotion I see for it, I've got that little voice in my head that says, you need to just click that button right now. And I have yet to do it, but it's going to happen. Are you seeing good results from it so far?
We are. The thing I found, though, and this is a great tip. We'll talk a business digital marketing tip here. One thing I found is that, I'm an unknown, right? Little Justin and the Benham brothers have a far bigger audience, but they're even kind of relatively unknown in some spaces outside the Christian community. And so when we promoted Dadboss, what I found was that there's this barrier of like, I'm not a Tony Robbins, I'm not a Dean Graziosi or a Brendan Burchard or someone like that, right? So when I promote my course, people are like, who is this guy? A lot of people don't know who I am. And so one of the mistakes that I made early on was I should have promoted a webinar or something that people could join to learn more that was no risk, no cost, and then move into something like a Dadboss because they need to warm up to me and they need to warm up to the content and what they're making an investment in. And so that's what we're about to launch, is a webinar series that will help people get more accustomed to what's in Dadboss, give them some great information in a webinar series, and then hopefully lead to them subscribing for Dadboss. And let me tell you, we took the pricing way down. It's at $59 right now. It'll probably go back up here shortly. We did that for Father's Day. And my point is that $59 isn't going to change my world. Most of the proceeds that we get are going to the foundation anyways, right? To accomplish our goals. That's how it's set up. And so, I think there's this, and I don't know what it is. There's this interesting kind of viewpoint out there where people are like, well, is Justin going to get rich off of this? Or is this just another course and it's like, no, that's not what my intent is. This course, one, we got to cover our costs. And then 2, after that, profit's going to go to the foundation to help support the initiatives I told you about.
Well, and $59, and even if it goes back up and whatever that price may be, small price to pay for becoming a better dad, becoming a more intentional dad, and ultimately working towards, creating that legacy that you're going to leave behind for your family. So, well worth it, I would say.
Well, thanks for that.
So, yeah, go ahead.
No, thanks for that. And what I would say is, what's interesting, I found that in talking to a lot of dads, another mistake that I made early on in the platform was I came out talking a lot about being a better dad. And, this will help you be a better dad and do this to be a better dad. And I got some feedback and it was like, hey, Justin, you know what? I am a good dad, or I don't really want to be a better dad. Some people actually said that. I'm like, that's so interesting. And what I found was that I was trying to give them what they needed instead of what they wanted. And so in the platform, we've shifted our messaging a lot, because what I've heard that they want is they all want their kids to be successful.
Yeah.
And so we've now shifted the platform a lot to talk more about, hey, how do you raise kids that can overcome any adversity in life? How do you help unlock the unlimited potential inside of your children? Right? Those kinds of messages, because that's what ultimately dads have told me that they want. They want tips, strategies, processes, platforms for how to help their kids be successful. Well, how do you do that? It's by being a better dad, right? So a lot of what we talk about is what they need, but on the front end, we've had to give them what they want. So that's the little behind the scenes in terms of our marketing and how we're trying to reach dads, because that's what they've told us they've wanted.
That's really smart, man. And that's It's not necessarily a subtle shift, but I can see how that would be way more effective. Yeah, that's really good. I don't know who gave you that advice, but they know what they're talking about, I think.
Absolutely.
So jumping back to fatherhood here. So like I said earlier, you're really active, and I know you're really active with your kids and very intentional in the activities that you do with them. How do you incorporate faith into your personal Daddy Saturday routine? Not necessarily the public facing platform, but just you with your kids one-on-one. How do you incorporate faith?
A variety of ways. I just did a post recently where it was a immensely special moment for our family, where my 3 boys all gave their lives to Christ and asked to do so together out here on our farm. And my wife kind of subtly had the video camera going and recorded the moment. And it was just amazing. I got to lead all 3 of my boys to that decision. And my daughter had already done it a couple of years ago. And so, all of my kids have now made that choice, which is just so powerful. And, that's like the big moment, right, of getting them to that point. And they're all old enough now that they could make that decision. But there were so many micro moments, Mark, that led up to that process, right? And it's kind of like people see the easy button, right, where the kids are making that decision. But it's like, man, you have no idea how many conversations and how many examples and all those components that have gone into that. And so I think that, not to overcomplicate it, because it can be a complicated thing. What we've just done is a couple of simple things. We've made prayer an open component of our family. And me as the father, I view myself as a spiritual leader of the family. And so we have made prayer something that we do open and often as a family. And, I, even as uncomfortable as it can be sometimes, I will pray for my kids. I'll pray over my wife. We'll pray as a family. And I've done, blessings over each of their lives and kind of anointed them. We do that often before they start school or before we go on a big trip or anything like that. And so they've just seen that routine. And so they become very comfortable with that process. And the other thing is, we incorporate biblical lessons into story time in the evenings before they go to bed. My boys still love stories. We'll do little things like we'll do scripture verses, and we'll talk about those scripture verses and what they mean. And it's not like we're doing rote Bible memorization, but we're just talking about it. So when we're driving to school in the morning or we're coming home in the evenings, there are so many opportunities to weave in biblical principles or concepts. And then the last thing I would say is, in terms of our current society and our culture, my wife and I just had some time alone with our daughter. We had a huge conversation around the homosexuality and LGBTQ and all that was going on. And it was all like an open conversation in the car, and it was all based on biblical worldview. And I think that's the last component that I would talk about is, we view our role, my wife and I, as the leaders of how we shape and form our kids' biblical worldview. So age appropriate, but we will bring up topics like that, and we will have conversations independently, one-on-one where necessary, or as a family where appropriate, and bring in that biblical worldview. We did another one around racism when the whole Black Lives Matter thing started, and I filmed that with my boys at the table, and we talked about what is racism and what does it mean and what are the differences between a Black person and a white person and a Hispanic person, and we just openly had that dialogue. But it was all centered on biblical worldview. And so, helping have those conversations and shape those with our kids, I think, are so important, because if we don't do that, Mark, they're going to get it from somewhere else. It's going to be their peers, the media, potentially a liberal teacher, right? Wherever it is. And so we're just very intentional about that. And so biblical worldview, praying openly, weaving God's word into simple things that we do, conversations. Those are all ways that we do that. And the final piece is far more is caught than taught. That is a Daddy Saturday principle. And I believe that, my kids seeing me lead and have that active faith life, and of course, attending church and things like that, right, are all ways that you can weave your faith into your family.
Yeah, that's so good, man. I've often sort of jokingly said, if your kids can't do a really good impression of you, then you're probably not speaking into their lives often enough.
That's awesome.
I usually open my shows with having my guests provide some sort of dad bio. I skipped right over that. You've got 4 kids, right? How old are they?
I do. So we've got 4 fabulous kids. Our daughter Hayden Olivia is 12, and then Blaine is 10, Mason is 8, and Easton is 6. So it's the even year of ages, and it's the odd year of school. So 7th grade, 5th grade, 3rd grade, and 1st grade.
Okay, and so they're all old enough, even the 6-year-old, to grasp a lot of what you just outlined with the biblical worldview. Has it been received pretty well?
100%. And what's so cool is that we're very fortunate in the area we live in. Our kids are able to go to a private Christian school. And so, in our family, that was a decision that we made. And financially, it doesn't make sense on paper, but I think eternally it makes a ton of sense, right? Because they're able to have that community and have that knowledge all day. Like my son Blaine plays 5th grade football, and they were singing "God is so good" in the locker room while they're lifting weights.
Oh, wow.
Like, are you kidding me? Like, who does that, right? I mean, it was just awesome. Yeah. And they're praying together as a team. One of the kids is leading the team through prayer at the end of practice, like just cool stuff like that. So it's not all on us. And so I think that's another way to it goes back to the hero and the guide scenario, whereas parents, surround your kids with other people that are pillars of faith and can help them grow in that relationship. And sometimes, those folks may be able to open up dialogue or open up relationship with your kids that maybe you can't because you're their parents. And sometimes that's uncomfortable. And they need those examples of mentors and leaders in their lives that can help lead them in those. It could be a coach, could be a mentor, teacher, those kinds of things, pastor.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's another important piece of it. And, even my 6-year-old, man, we call him the preacher because he's the one where it's like, all right, we're at dinner. Who's going to lead us in the blessing before we eat? And everyone kind of looks around like, not me, not me. And then he'll be like, I'll do it. And he just takes it and he's awesome.
That's awesome.
It's those moments like that make you proud as a parent.
Well, that may be one of his spiritual giftings.
It very well could be, right? And as parents, that's our job to pull that out of them.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's awesome. Well, man, as we're rounding up to the end of our time here, I guess one of the last questions I have is, through all of this whole journey that you've had, the revelation of starting Daddy Saturday, writing the book, creating the foundation, launching Dadboss, and I know you have a podcast, which we haven't even touched on. This is a really big question, but what are some of your biggest lessons that you've learned through all this?
I'll probably say the biggest lesson that I've learned is that I am completely imperfect and I make mistakes all the time. And I had this perfection gene for a long time in my life that I'm approaching 40. I'll be 40 in January. It's taken me a long time to learn that. I had this perfection ideal as a father. And then, you put yourself out there. So now I'm a father who's talking about fatherhood and trying to, be an example to other dads. And I held myself to this higher standard that I recognized that was unachievable. And the more I just became vulnerable and transparent and shared my own struggles and shared my own mistakes, the better dad I became. And so I think for me, every year, the last 2 years, Father's Day has been one of the worst times of the year for me. And it should have been 2 of the best times. I launched a book 2 Father's Days ago. I launched Dadboss last Father's Day. And man, I was stressed out. I was trying to push it all on my own, trying to make it happen, kind of got in that activator mode, driver mode, which I tend to do. And, I was not patient with my kids. I was stressed out. There was a lot of tension. And, looking back, I was like, man, here I am, the dad of trying to be an example to other dads. And, my day of the year, Father's Day, has been 2 of the worst. And I don't say it wasn't like that bad, but it wasn't what I wanted it to be, right? It wasn't the Chevy Chase Father's Day I built up in my head. And so I've just learned that I need to let myself not be dependent upon myself for those situations. And the more I let, God live through me and seek him for strength and guidance and wisdom, and the less I try and do it on my own, which is a hard lesson to learn, the better I am as a father, as a husband, and as the leader of this platform and this movement. And so for me, it's been a lot of that. So self-reflection, self-diagnosis, and then moving through that process. The other thing is I've learned a ton about men in general and fathers, and what an interesting group of individuals we are as men. And I'm really passionate about it. And I want to learn more. And I want to change the dialogue in our society in the way that men and fathers in particular are viewed. And I think that we're at a tipping point where people like you and me and several others who are in this space can make that happen. And I think all of us as men need to come together in community. So the last thing I've learned is that fatherhood is not meant to be done in isolation. It's meant to be done in community. And as men, we tend to have pride and ego, as I talked about before, and that causes us to try and do it all on our own. It goes back to the hero thing. And so we as fathers need to drop that ideal and come together in community and all move forward together. Because, hey, man, it's way more fun when you do it together. And it's way easier too. So that's the last thing I'd say I'd learned.
Yeah, that's so good, man. That's so good. Well, we've danced around the topic of legacy throughout this whole interview. Maybe not bringing up the exact word, but we've kind of danced around it. And everybody has their own idea of legacy. But when you think of an inspired legacy, so if Justin Batt wants to leave an inspired legacy, what's that mean to you?
Well, the platform of Daddy Saturday is all about raising good kids to become great adults. So for me, my legacy with my own family is that my kids become great adults and they become world changers and they fully can embrace the calling that God has placed in their life and their talents and their gifts. And that would be the legacy that I hope to leave in my own children. And that happens by the way that they're raised by my wife and I in the time that they're in the home. And then beyond that, for Daddy Saturday, the legacy that I hope to leave is that we hit that marker of impacting 10 million fathers over the next 10 years. And we end the fatherlessness epidemic as it stands. And it isn't what it is 10 years from now. And we can look back and say, we didn't do it all on our own, clearly, but we had a major role in making that change.
Yeah, that's good. For God's glory, too. That's good stuff, man. Well, Justin, I know you got a lot of irons in the fire, a lot of things going on. What's the best way for people to follow you online and keep track of what's going on?
Thanks, Mark. I appreciate you having me on so much. And this has been an awesome conversation. I think for folks that want to learn more, the 3 easiest places to go are daddysaturday.com. You can find more information on the platform. We've got a ton of free resources for you to engage with. And you can also find more information about the foundation there as well. Dadboss.com, BOSS, is the easiest place to find information on Dadboss. And then you can find me at Justin Batt on LinkedIn as well to follow me personally.
Nice. Justin, this has been awesome. Appreciate your time today, man.
Thanks, Mark. Appreciate you as well.
Thanks for listening today, guys. And again, if you got anything out of today's message, remember to subscribe to the show, leave a 5-star rating and review, and there's a link on how to do that in the show notes. And be sure to share this message because, again, when we work together to lift up fatherhood, we're going to change the world one dad at a time. So until next time, live inspired.